Hi, fellow travel lovers. Ryan here. This week's episode is going to flow a little bit differently than normal, so let me give you the rundown before we get started. This week, we're going to have our interview of our guest and our guest's travel story, but that's going to be the entire episode. We actually have a really long conversation with this week's guest, and so instead of doing a really long episode, we decided to break it into two more normal length episodes. So you won't get the wish you were here's or any of those follow-up questions this week. You'll have to tune in next week to get those. All right, and with that, let's get started.
To India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 48. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
but that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today we're talking to Alex. Alex is a filmmaker living in LA. Welcome, Alex!
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Oh, we're happy to have you. It sounds like I'm excited to talk to you about travel because it sounds like in addition to just for funsies, you travel for work a lot, huh?
Yes, so I have been doing documentary films for the last probably like 9 years, and so
Has it really been that long?
it's been a long time, and it started out kind of slow. It was like little, like maybe we'd drive up to like San Francisco from Los Angeles, which is like maybe a 6-hour drive, and then over the years we started going more and more like international, and it started with Canada and then went to London and then went to the middle of nowhere in Zimbabwe, and so I've just been
Wow.
kind of hanging on and enjoying the ride. But yeah, so I do travel quite a bit for work, and I really enjoy it.
That's so fun. What's the best and worst part about it?
The best part is that I get to go and see the world on somebody else's dime. Usually, when a company's paying for you to go somewhere, that's the best. But the worst part is that I don't get to make the agenda at all. Usually, we only have enough time in these cities to do what we absolutely have to do from a filming perspective. So instead of getting to really explore and see the world, it's me carrying cameras and tripods and lights and sandbags we've done, gosh, I remember the first time we went to London, we didn't know that we should rent a car. And so we were carrying all of our gear on the tube up and down stairs across the city. And it was a miserable welcome to London, a city which I now love. But yeah, so the bummer about it is that we're always working and very infrequently have times to really dig deep and enjoy a city.
Yeah, I can see it's like two sides of the same coin, kind of, as far as like the positives and negatives of that.
We've definitely learned to, like, after hours, go out and walk around at like 10, 11, midnight, just so that we can see what's going on in a new place. But we're not taking walking tours of a city or the hop-on, hop-off bus or going to visit museum during hours they're open. So that's the only real downside.
Wait, hold on. When you say not going to museums during hours that they're open, do you go to museums during hours that they're not open?
We've tried. We've
Trying to
tried.
do some like night at the museum stuff, or what are you up to?
You kind of have to make do. A lot of times you just get to see the outside of buildings, but we're not above trying doors just to see what happens. And
Sure. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? You set off an alarm and get arrested.
it makes for a good story, though, Ryan.
Exactly.
Oh man, how many countries have you been to?
Oh boy, let me take a quick peek. I'm not sure. Have you guys used the app Bin before? Been?
Is that another
No.
app?
It's pretty
Tell
cool.
us about it.
So it's an app that basically allows you to type in the countries that you've been to, and it'll like
Oh.
keep track of it. So I'm
Cool.
pulling up my Bin app, and I've been to 43 countries.
Oh my gosh.
Is that a lot?
43.
Yes,
that is
that's
a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
That
so
definitely is a lot.
I'm going to follow up, though, with a question that I often will think about. How many states in the U.S. have you been to?
I have been to 33 states in the U.S.
Okay, so it's quite a few states, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have been to more countries than you've been to states.
Yes.
That's true.
That is hard, I think, for a lot of people to say who live in the states. So, yeah.
Well, if I have the time to travel, as much as I want to go check out North and South Dakota, if I'm going to take the time and spend the money, I'd rather maybe go somewhere that's a little bit more
Brad.
difficult to get to. Because, someday I imagine with my family, it's going to be a little bit difficult to fly across the world with young kids. And so then it's all right, hop in the car. We're driving to the Dakotas. So
Yeah.
that feels
Although
a lot
I
more
do-
realistic.
Yes, but I do know people who take their young kids traveling with them. I think we have one of our guests, Cheryl, I think. Was it Andy
Andy.
who talked about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it probably requires changing your travel style, I would imagine. Traveling with kids, there's going to be different expectations. Or Ian, when he was on, he talked about those expectations a lot of kind of the idea of just having one thing that you're going to do that day and then just kind of letting go of a lot. And if we need nap time or we need time to break down, then that's okay. And so yeah, I think you can't push kids in the same way that you as an adult can push yourself, it seems like. So
No.
But maybe that would be good for all of our health. So maybe we all should travel with kids.
I think it will be a healthy change of pace someday.
Maybe.
Ryan doesn't want to. That's fine, Ryan.
I don't know that I want to travel with kids. So
I don't
much.
know how much you over push yourself with travel, though. Do you still get rest when you travel?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. I don't always. So
No, you.
yeah.
I mean, but typically, what'll happen? It'll be almost like the opposite of you, Alex. Because I'm not working not exactly. When I'm traveling, and so I'll do all the things that I want to during the day, and then I will be exhausted, and I will just go and sit in the hotel or the Airbnb or whatever, and just do nothing all night. I don't go out. I don't do evening things most of the time.
What?
And that's how I take it. Well, okay, I don't drink. I don't that's not my scene. I don't want to go out and just talk to random people all the time. So a lot of the evening stuff is not stuff that appeals to me in the first place. And then I'm tired. So I've been walking all day. I've been doing all these things all day. So that's kind of how I rest, is usually as we go, as opposed to taking a whole day to rest, because that feels like a waste of time to me.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I found that because I've only been able to experience some cities after dark, I've kind of fallen in love with walking around a city, especially if it's picture this, it's just rained, and so the ground is wet, illuminating the street lights, not many tourists out and about, and you just get to go and explore a city. And it's if you're in London, walking up and down the Thames at sunset and then into the night is one of my favorite things in the world. So I've fallen
I'll
in
give
love.
you that.
Yeah.
But I think it just depends on what's going on during the day too. So if it's a down day, walking and just enjoying scenery, I would totally do that. But most of the time when I hear people talk about going out at night, it's usually to go out and go to a pub or go to a club or whatever the people do when they do night things.
Those young people, I don't understand them.
Kids. Raucous, rambunctious little crazy people. See, now you got me distracted. Now I'm going through. I downloaded Bin, and now I have to mark off all the countries I've been to.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
It's pretty great, and it'll tell you the percentage of the world and the percentage of Europe and the percentage of the Americas. And
Yeah, but it makes me sad because there's all these places I haven't been.
oh,
I know.
Ryan,
That's
it should
gonna
make
make me
you
sad,
excited because there are so many places that you are going to get to see for the first time. Isn't that wild?
Well, yeah, except I'm a realist, Alex, and so I'm I'm probably never gonna go there. probably never gonna go there. Never even
And
heard
that's
of
why
that
we have
place.
this podcast. What if, oh, Ryan, we should do a Ben one for our podcast so we
What do you
can check
mean?
off all the places our podcast has been to.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Put a pin map on the
That-
wall, put little like
Yes.
pins in it.
That
I
would
definitely
be
thought
way
about that.
fun. It's just like a digital version for our podcast to see like what are all the countries and states and everything that we've been to through Take Me With You.
That's a great idea.
I love
When
that.
we don't have time or money to travel sometimes.
Sometimes, a lot of times. Okay.
Yes.
There we go. All good.
50 weeks of the year or whatever. So.
I've only made it to 7% of the world.
But what's your country count?
Does it give me a count total?
If you click the percentage, it'll turn into the number.
Oh. No, it won't. Not on my app. it
Are you
doesn't.
on some Android or something?
Yes.
He is.
Yes.
He
I
sure
Oh,
is.
that's okay. That's okay.
I could count them by hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. But one of those is the U.S., so I don't feel like that. And I don't feel like I marked off Mexico.
Not everyone's been to the U.S., Ryan. Why do you take
Well-
that for granted?
Because
Yeah,
I
come on.
live here.
Okay, that's fair.
So I don't feel like that counts as like, I mean, it is a country I've been to. That's true. Okay, you've got me so distracted. I'm going to come back to what we're supposed to do.
Oh.
So, Alex, there are 3 questions that we'd like to ask every guest to just kind of help us get to know you as a traveler a little bit more. So the first question is, why do you travel?
I think that I'm a very social person, and so I like to travel to kind of meet people and see what their life is like. My travel preference is I don't like going somewhere as a stranger. I like going somewhere as a local. And so what that looks like is I'll find and try and like meet someone who lives in a different country, and then at some point during our conversation, they'll say, "Oh, you should totally come and visit me sometime." And then I do. And then I get to kind of go and experience life as a local, kind of doing the things that they want to do, seeing the things that they want to see. So for me, that's kind of why I travel. It's, very much about the destination, but more so for me about getting to experience it through the eyes of the people who live there and through the people who spend every day there.
How do you connect with people in different countries? Like, to be able to have those connections in the countries that you go to.
Yeah. It all is kind of random. The biggest thing for me actually is in 2012. In 2009, Ryan and I went to Slovenia with an organization who
Yeah,
I
we did.
then interned with in 2012. So during that
That's awesome.
Yeah, during that internship, I was living in the Czech Republic, and I didn't really have a team. Kind of how it worked is every country had a couple teams that would go and help run these English camps, but they flew me over with a camera and said, "Okay, now go and film everything." So I didn't have people, so I had to kind of travel around and meet people. So in the process, I went to, I think 8 countries, and I met all the country leaders, and I spent time with them, and I stayed at their house. And so then all of a sudden I had a great foundation for, okay, now I know people that live in these countries. And over time I've kind of gone back and led, workshops for, how do you make videos for your English camp, or how do you, what kind of gear do we need? So I've kind of been involved with various aspects of this organization for the last few years, and every time I go over, I'll meet new people from new countries and kind of go from there. As well as I had a couple friends from university who were from out of town. So I visited one friend in Hong Kong for Thanksgiving last year, and then I visited another friend who was from Norway in his home the year before, just to see what his small town in Norway was all about.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. Isn't it the best shock ever when you actually make it happen and show up and they're like, oh, you actually came. And it's like, yep,
It's
sure did. It's so fun. Yeah.
It's great, and I think there's a very much lost in translation aspect of it, where in other countries, if you say, oh, you should come visit me in America, or oh, you should go do this, they take that as your word. And so when they say it, like I grew up in Seattle, we say things like, oh, yeah, I'll try and make it to your event tonight, and you have no intentions of going. Sorry, Seattleites. I realized that when I went to
it's true,
college
though.
and got called out
So
so
true.
hard. So I grew up with that mentality, but then after spending time with people and saying things like, "Oh, you should come visit me in America," and then people being like, "Wait, okay, what dates can I come and visit you?" Did I realize, oh, when people are saying you should come and visit me in Romania or wherever, they're actually meaning it. So I've just learned that if they're going to offer and are genuine, life's way too short not to take them up on it.
I love that. That's so good. Yeah. Well, and I've had friends from the States who have moved to other places and I've gone and visited them.
Yeah.
And they've also just been so grateful because they're like, I had so many people say they were going to come and you were the only one that did. And so it's like for someone who's homesick, I think it's like a really cool thing to be able to do is like actually show up, And so,
Totally.
yeah. And then also free lodging, So.
It does help the budget. Okay, second question. You sort of have touched on this a little bit already, but what type of traveler are you?
When I'm traveling for work, I feel like I would almost call it like a mischievous traveler, where I'm going to look for every tiny little opportunity to do something and like soak up the culture. So usually what that means is everyone says, oh, all right, good day, everybody. We're going to bed. And I'm like, all right, good night, everybody. I watch them go up to their rooms and then I'll run out the front door and like hop on a tram and go see a landmark or go do something like that. Or the best one for me is, we'll spend a day and I'll just be like, oh yeah, we should go around the city and I'll just take a camera and I'll do some time lapses. And then what I do is I get an entire day where I can go to all of the places that I want to go, and then I'll set up a camera and take time lapses and get B-roll. So for work, I'm kind of like a mischievous traveler where I'll go out and I'll like find like little opportunities to kind of sneak out and see things. For when traveling for fun, I would say that I'm a nonstop doer. Like, I don't need to sleep when I travel. The joke is my coworkers say, man, every time you come back from a vacation, you look like you need a vacation. And that's just because if I have, 24 hours in a country or 36 hours in a city, I want to soak up as much as I can and go see everything and do anything. So I'm taking all of the public transportation and going and eating at local restaurants, and I'll talk to every like waiter or bartender or whoever I can find and ask, okay, where are you, like where would you go tonight to eat, where would you go to to watch a show or see the fireworks, or I don't know what goes on in these towns. And so I'll always ask the locals. And so I just kind of go nonstop. And Ryan, I'm kind of like you. I don't really go hard. I don't drink a lot. I just like walking. And so I'll walk anywhere from 8 to 15 miles a day in some random town, sleep for 6 hours, wake up early the next morning and do it all over again. So it's a tough pace trying to keep up. When I travel with friends, I definitely have to like lower my amount of enthusiasm. And I've had people say, Alex, I'm going to take the morning off and sleep because I can't keep up, which is totally fair. But I like to do as much as I can and never stop.
All right. Let me know when you finally do collapse, because you can only go like that for so long. Let me know. I'll be interested to hear.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Last question, and then we'll dive into your travel story for today. What is your number one travel tip?
So I'm a huge aviation nerd, and I kind of grew up loving planes, and I still do. And so one of the things that I would recommend for people is to figure out the things that you like and that you don't like during the actual transportation. So, some of it's stupid. Like, do you like Airbus planes? Do you like Boeing planes? Do you like, I go on Seat Guru, which is a website that basically says, hey, if you choose this seat, it's right by a bathroom, or if you choose this seat, there's like no window there, or this exit row is configured this way. My biggest travel tip is to pay attention to the things that you like and don't like during travel, the different airlines that you like or don't like. If you don't like the fact that you have to pay for a seat, or bags are $80, or whatever it is. I have my favorite planes in the sky too. So when I book my flights, I'll say, oh, I would much rather fly a Dreamliner than an A330. And so I will book my flights based on the planes that I like. And overall, my travel experience has been wildly improved by that, because I know that I'm going to arrive much more refreshed. And, some planes will like pump, what's the word I'm looking for? Some planes will humidify the air. And so you show up and you don't have that like dry, scratchy throat, but you just feel hydrated and ready to go. So that's kind of it. Like
Nice.
keep track of the things that you do. Figure out what planes you like, what planes you don't like, what airlines you like, what bus lines you like, what cruise lines you like. So then, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when you're booking travel, you at least have a bit of an idea of the things, kind of your personal do's and don'ts and preferences of airline experiences.
Nice. That's good advice.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right. So, what trip are you going to tell us about today?
Ryan, I've thought long and hard about the answer to this question. And this trip for me actually started in the Czech Republic. So I was teaching at a media academy out there. And this couple from Romania comes up to me and says, Alex, you have to come and visit us in Romania. And I thought, I've never thought about visiting Romania, but tell me about it. Why should I come? And they started weaving these tales of beautiful landscapes and Dracula history and castles. And the thing that got me going actually was the people. They said, Alex, picture this. In where you live, if it snows, what do the people do? And I said, oh, they'd probably hide inside and lock their doors in Los Angeles because they wouldn't know what to do. And they said, in Romania, the road gets jammed because everyone's driving to parking lots to do donuts in the fresh snow. And I thought, this sounds amazing. When can I go to Romania? So
They knew their audience.
Oh, they had me pegged to a T. And so I thought, this culture is absolutely fascinating to me, so I have to go. So today I'm going to tell you about the trip to Romania and the other countries that we happened to visit while we were there. So, because why not? So it was Diana and Bogdan, and I reached out to them, a couple months later, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about coming to Romania. And they said, great, what are your dates? We'd love to host you and show you the country. So we set up the dates. They were only available for the first half, but I had another friend there who kind of took me on a road trip for the second half. So it ended up working out perfectly. So I showed up on the ground knowing nothing about the country. I just knew that these guys were going to pick me up from the airport and had some things in mind. And so I thought, this is fantastic. I'll let the locals show me around. So I landed in Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania, and we ended up only spending a total of 12 hours in Bucharest for the entire 10-day trip. We got back to their house and they said, all right, Alex, well, unfortunately, you're only going to get 4 hours of sleep because we're leaving at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning to take you on a road trip across the country. So I said, great. So I woke up the next morning and we hopped in the car and we drove clear across Romania to the other side of the country, and we hit up all of these really fascinating historical sites along the way. And kind of on the way, they said, Alex, what are you interested in learning about? And I said, well, what is there in Romania? So they started telling me the history about Dracula. And I said, this is something fascinating. This is something that I want to learn about and go to. So we ended up hitting a bunch of castles along the way. And kind of with each castle, they had some sort of Romanian Dracula history weaved in. And so kind of I got to pick up little pieces of that story along the way as we went.
Because Transylvania is in Romania, right?
Exactly. So Romania is split up into 3 states, if you will. One of them is Romania, one of them is Transylvania, and the other one is Moldova, which shares a name with the country of Moldova, which is directly next to Moldova.
Huh.
Oh,
I didn't realize those were.
interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a Moldova region of Romania and then a Moldova separate country.
Exactly. It used to be one country, but then was it Treaty of Versailles? I don't know. In one of those European break up the states treaty, they gave half of Moldova to Romania, and Transylvania got like sucked into that as well. So, yeah. So we're driving across the country, and we stop at a city called Sibiu, and there's just this massive castle in the middle of Romania, and I was like, man, this is wild. Growing up in America, you don't hear about the famous Romanian castles. Like maybe you hear about like castles in Britain, castles in, like even like Spain and Portugal, but you don't hear about the Romanian castle. So it's this massive castle, moat, drawbridge, the whole 9 yards. And there's this like museum in there that kind of tells about the history of Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. And
that was his name?
His name was Vlad the Impaler. So
that's so much
That's
cooler
a
than
choice.
Dracula.
Right? So what would happen was there's this small little mountain pass that all of the goods coming into Transylvania would need to go through. And they would need to pay taxes in order to go through it. Now, what was happening is people were kind of skirting around or bribing the officials, but one day, Vladimir the Impaler, became the count. I think Count Dracula. I think he became the count or the king or the ruler of this region. And he said, no longer are people going to be bribing their way through here without paying taxes. They're going to pay taxes. So what would happen is if people tried to escape or go around, he would impale them with a spike, which is legitimately taking a spike through their backside and then up through their mouth and just leaving them there until they dehydrated. Because, it was...
Wait, Ryan, did you not know what impaling is?
Well, yeah, but I didn't realize it was a particular direction.
Yeah.
Oh, uh-huh.
It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, the people don't actually die immediately. They die of dehydration.
Oh.
So, yeah, Vlad had a pretty bad reputation in the area.
Yeah. Oh.
So there were German traders who would come down and see what was happening, and they thought, oh my gosh, how can we drag this guy's name through the dirt so that he will be like labeled as some sort of terrible person and they'll kick him out of power and put in somebody weaker for us.
How about because he is a terrible person because he impaled people?
He was just trying to enforce the law, and it was actually
okay.
I think because the culture then was very religious, I think people were actually very okay with that because how does religious make it okay to impale somebody? Well, I think his whole thing was like upholding law and religious law, trade law, everything law. And he didn't really have much leniency for people who went against the law. So
any kind of law.
He got this really bad rap from foreigners, but from what I remember, the people who were under him actually didn't mind him that much. So then what would happen is these German traders went back to Germany and they like collaborated with all of their German authors and they started coming up with the legend of Dracula. And that's kind of where the legend of Dracula came from, was from Vlad the Impaler, and how the Germans kind of wanted to paint him as this really, really, really evil, dark, nasty guy.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I knew nothing about this. And then I was going through the country and they're like, oh yeah, Vlad used to visit this castle. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, my boy Vlad coming to these awesome, like amazing castles in the middle of Romania. Oh, wow. So that was definitely a highlight for me, was getting to kind of explore and see these sites and learn the history. And I do have a very terrible memory, so I wrote a lot down. I took a lot of pictures, and it was just really exciting. So,
Okay, for the record, I looked it up. Impale is just to pierce or transfix with a sharp instrument.
Oh,
It
really?
is not directional.
I thought impaling was a really specific
Because like you can be
direction and
like you
location.
could be impaled with a spike like through the chest, and that could be impaled.
yeah, I'm looking at impalement as torture, and the picture is definitely coming out his mouth.
Well, I'm sure impalement as torture.
But I think you're right.
Sure.
The technical definition of impale is it can just go in and out of the body somewhere. That's not how they did
Fun.
it in ancient ancient Transylvania, though.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Oh,
Vlad the
man.
Impaler was like, nope, I'm going to use this word very specifically.
Yeah, he's like, hey guys, I've got a vision here. Just work with me through it.
So what I want to know is like, what does the country look like both in like architecture and nature and terrain, like all of those things. Like what are we looking at here?
So that's a great question. The country is very like kind of Eastern European in nature, where you'll have a ton of grassland, a ton of forests, a ton of mountains. It's very much unpopulated. Rural, I think, is the right word for that for most of the city. And there will be like little villages here and there where, people have been living for thousands of years, farming and raising animals. And the biggest city, which is Bucharest, is very much feels like a kind of like a mid-sized Western city with fast food and high-rise buildings and parks and all of that. But the rest of the country feels very distinct from anything that I've ever seen before. I'm not a big architecture guy, but the architecture for all of these castles, for instance, was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I don't know if you've seen online, there are those buildings that kind of have these windows that almost look like eyes, like the buildings are looking at you. Have you guys ever seen those pictures before?
Maybe.
Building with the eyes that are looking at you.
Yeah, so the
you
way
just
that they
Google
would
that?
build their like roofs and the windows kind of in the tops of their buildings almost made it look like the buildings all had eyes that were looking at you.
Wow, really?
Yeah, hold on. Buildings with
I Google searched buildings with eyes and roofs, and the Romania eyes is one of the
CBU.
first things.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Romania, CBU. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Good job, Google.
Yeah. So we stopped.
Oh my gosh, they're so funny.
Isn't that hilarious?
It looks like a children's book. Oh my goodness. It looks like Cars 2, where it's about houses instead of cars or something like that.
Are they just the little tiny
Little
ones?
slits in the
Oh, that
roof.
is interesting.
Like a little.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like it's a
Oh,
little
it's-
tiny, like rectangular window.
It
but the,
looks like
the roof,
monsters
like,
live in the house.
It does, and the roof like kind of like comes up and has a little bulge over where the window is. So it's not like a window in like the side of the building. It's on like the angled roof, and so it does. It looks like a bunch of eyes. Like,
Yeah.
maybe
Yes.
like 5 or 6 of them on the side.
Like
That is so-
monsters cut a little hole in the roof and are like peering out with their
Yeah.
eyes, and very
like
large
like a Muppet.
monsters.
Like if the building was a Muppet and it like came to life in the middle of a sketch, that's what it would look like.
Yeah. So everywhere you go, it just looks like the buildings are just looking at you. And in a lot of Eastern Europe, it's hilarious because you have like grandparents and like old men and women who just like, for fun, they'll just like sit at the window and like look out at the street. So everywhere you go, you just have people looking at you. And then in Sibiu, Romania, it's literally the buildings too look like they're just staring at you everywhere you go. And so,
Wow.
I've never seen anything like that anywhere else in the world. And And I think that's a lot of what Romania was for me, is the architecture and the buildings and the castles were unlike anything that I'd seen in any part of the world. It was very distinct and very colorful and kind of unique in its architecture. So all of the cities were fascinating to walk through.
That's so cool. Wow. And so what were the people like?
Well, that's not a great question because I mainly just stayed with this family. I wasn't interacting
Okay.
with too many random people, but I went and like stayed with their grandparents and they like made me eat like 80 donuts, which was kind of funny. They're very hospitable.
Now, so when you say 80, that's an exaggeration.
They were small. I probably ate at least 20.
But are these like homemade donuts?
Yeah, we showed up to I think it was Diana's mom's house. Her mom didn't speak any English, but saw that they had a visitor, and so she's like, "Oh, let me go make food." And I'm like, "Oh no, no, I'm not hungry." And then like 10 minutes later, she comes out with a whole plate of these donuts with powdered sugar and puts them in front of me. And Diana's like, "Well, it looks like you have to eat them now." So I go and I eat all of these donuts, and I'm just stuffed. But I don't know how to say no. Like, I want to be polite. I don't want to accidentally like offend their mother who like hosted us in their house for a meal. Like, it was
Oh,
pretty
my
funny.
goodness.
And then she
And
made
what a good
another
That
batch
is so
for
funny.
me. Oh my gosh, it was pretty aggressive.
But
But
she's like, I don't know how to like tell him that I don't want to bake for him anymore.
Yeah.
And I was just being
I was like, "No, I'm okay. I'm good, thanks." And then she just hands me another plate, and I'm like,
Oh
"Oh,
my goodness.
what am I gonna do with this?" I gained so much weight that trip.
Isn't it funny how much feeding people and food, like there's just so much wrapped in culture with that of and like hospitality with that of like, I don't know, what is polite and impolite and how do you offer things and
Yeah.
accept them and yeah, that's so yeah. Wow.
It's pretty wild. I think as Americans, we do have a bit of an advantage, though, in a weird way, because so much of the media kind of portrays Americans as just outgoing, happy, friends with everybody. So if you go to a
So
place,
basically you.
well, I do decent. People are like, "Oh yeah, this guy's definitely American." Even when I try to blend in, they have me pegged from the beginning, and I thought, "Oh,
Yep.
dang it."
Yep.
But it's kind of nice because I think there's that like that enthusiasm covers over a multitude of evils, if that makes sense, from like a cultural standpoint, because they're kind of, especially, and I know Ryan kind of has seen this a little bit when we did English camps, is people just want to talk and hear what you have to say, and they like the fact that Americans in general are like a lot more open and a lot more friendly and a lot more fun, especially in like former communist countries where the older generation spent years and years kind of having to keep to themselves and not rustle any feathers. Then Americans coming in almost give you permission to get out of your shell a little bit and have a little bit more fun because, I mean, that's what we are on TV, that's what we are in media, and if that's what we are in real life, then oh man, this must be okay. So I've found it's been pretty helpful in connecting with people, and especially like obviously if there's anything that you're kind of unclear about, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do, help me here." And they're like, "This is hilarious, this American doesn't know our culture and he wants our help. We'll absolutely help him." And so you just kind of I don't want to say barrel through cultural barriers, but that's sometimes what it feels like. With respect and with all of that, you can kind of just be like, "Hey, I don't know what to do here. Can you help me out? Help me learn, help me understand." And a lot of people are like, "This is cool. He wants to know about our culture. I'm going to help him out." And having that
And
mentality helps.
What's interesting is that actually, at least in my experience, happens in the United States too. We just don't do it in our culture. Like being willing to admit, I have no idea what's going on here. I need somebody to help me. Like that is not. I'm not that we don't ask for help in the United States, because definitely sometimes we do. But I think because we are so individualistic as a culture, there's a sense of needing to be able to do things on your own, and so at least my experience has been when when you're willing to just say, yeah, no, I really have no idea what I'm doing, can you help explain it to me? People are more than happy to help explain it to you.
Totally.
Because it also, I think, validates them that they have some knowledge that I don't have. So it's cool to hear you describe that, and then I've also experienced that here in the States even.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more subtle. It's probably not quite as overt, but I learned, I don't know how long ago, a while ago, that I'm willing to be the dumb one.
Yeah.
And be like, yeah, no, sorry, I'm not tracking with you. What's going on here?
I think you have a lot more fun that way and can learn a lot more that way too. Because if you show up to a place and be like, I read all about this in my guidebook. This is the this and this and this and this and this and this. Then people are like, okay, cool. Well, you and your guidebook go and have fun over there. Whereas if you show up to a place and you're like, okay, I have 12 hours in this city and I have no idea what to do. Show me what do I need to do? What do I need to see? What do I need to eat? What do I need to If you just show up with that attitude and that enthusiasm, people are so willing to show off the best things about their country that, the guidebooks are kind of made for tourists, more or less. Go to Big Ben, go to the Houses of Parliament, go see this landmark, where the locals are like, oh my gosh, all of the, there's a park and there's a bunch of friendly cats that hang out there. You got to go feed the cats and hang out with them, or little things like that that just kind of make it more meaningful and memorable than going and seeing the sites that everyone goes and sees. So
do you avoid those big sites and those tourist things? Obviously for work you don't have a lot of flexibility, but when you travel yourself.
I think I'm not averse to it, but I don't look at the top 3 things to do in a city and make sure that I go do them. Maybe I'll go and see it and walk by and be like, oh, cool, that's this monument. Neat. But that's not the things that really attract me to a city. I would rather go kind of more off the grid, or there's a great website called Atlas Obscura where people,
yes.
I'm sure it's been mentioned on this show multiple times, but it's a great website where people will kind of put in some of the smaller monuments or the kind of off the grid places to go and see. And so I tend to like to do that a little bit more. So there's a part 2 to this story that I'm going to barrel through. I'm sorry, I'm getting really off course, but yes. So on our road trip through Romania, we saw a bunch of castles that Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, had visited. And I think it's so big in their tourist culture too that everything is, ooh, Dracula's castle, Dracula's coffee, Dracula's this, Dracula's that. And a lot of it's totally just made up. But we did go to the birthplace of Vlad the Impaler in Sighișoara. We went to the very room that he was born in, and there was actually a Dracula impersonator, who was in a coffin, who would rah at you, and you're like, oh man, there he is. And then he'd like ask for a tip, and you're like, oh, here's $1. Like, it was pretty funny. But the whole town was really cool. So we spent a day driving across the country. We saw some really cool like mud volcanoes on our way. They were literally like volcanoes, but at the top of them, it was like mud. So imagine if you go to the beach and you scoop up like a handful of wet sand and you kind of like make your little like sand volcanoes with the wet sand dripping down. It looked like that, except it was coming up and bubbling up from the bottom. So it was this whole like national park of like mud cones that would like drip down into like volcanic rivers, and they were like cold volcanoes. It was pretty wild.
But it wasn't warm?
They weren't hot. Like you could like touch the water because it was like, I don't know.
Sure, you could touch it, but it wasn't warm at all.
It was warm, but it wasn't ice cold, but it wasn't like lava. It was just somehow the earth was like, we are gonna take this mud and like plop it up through the earth and make these cool like
Yes.
mud volcanoes. So
Wow.
yeah, that was pretty wild. I wasn't
Okay,
expecting
I got
to
a
see
new place
that.
I gotta go.
Yeah. So other highlights, we stopped in a city called Brashov, if you will. Okay, I'm just gonna take a quick aside. When you guys go to a new city and it has like some sort of like Brashov or something like that, how do you approach it? Do you just like be like, I'm gonna be an American and call it Brashov, or do you like go in and you try and like Brashov? Like, what's your approach to trying to pronounce city names correctly?
I try my best, and I'm not like I don't know, not super good at those things, but I think it's kind of the similar thing to what you were saying about like jumping into culture and just being like, hey, I'm trying my best to not slaughter your language or like Americanize your word, and I think that like it can just be more fun for locals if you're like, I'm gonna try, and like as opposed to just being like, nope, not worth it. And so I don't know, I think it's more fun to try. So
I like that.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
my style. Yeah.
I'm very similar. I will try and pronounce things the way, as close as I can to the way the locals pronounce things. Language fascinates me. I'm barely fluent in English, and so I definitely don't speak any other languages. But trying to figure out what the sounds are, I really enjoy trying to be able to read another language. So trying to figure out what the patterns are as far as like, okay, how is this letter said, or how would they say this, or wait, how come one time when I heard it like this letter it sounded like this, and then another time it was like that. Alex, you and I were talking before we started recording, since we both went to Slovenia together, and there's a town up in the northern part of Slovenia that I've mentioned on this podcast several times that frustrates the heck out of me as far as how to pronounce, because depending on which Slovene you ask, they will pronounce it differently, and they will correct you if you say it the wrong way, even though it's the way a different one of them said it.
Oh my gosh.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
That's hilarious. What city is it?
It's Bled.
Bled?
Yes, because some people say bled, some people say blade, some people say bled. It's like I've heard it all of those ways, and no matter what I say, it's always wrong.
Jeez. Well,
That's so funny.
Oh man, I'm gonna try and avoid saying that around any locals then.
Oh, I still try. I still do my best, but
just maybe intentionally slaughter it. Make up a fourth way to say it and be like, oh no, this is the way it's really supposed to be. Blad, like correct them every time. That'd be really good.
Just be like,
well.
Excuse me, actually,
like,
it's Bled. So.
I like that. So we were in a town called Brashov, and they like modeled themselves a little bit after Hollywood. So there's like a big Brashov sign on like the side of a hill in like white letters overlooking the city. So we went up there and got a really cool view and took some pictures. So the road trip was a ton of fun, and it was 3 days. We went over the entire country, got very little sleep. Ryan, you asked for me to tell you when I slowed down. I like passed out in the back seat of the car more times than I'm willing to admit on that trip. So we got back to Bucharest, and they had a conference in, I think, Italy. So they had to leave. So I still had half of my trip left. And there was another friend who was there named Aline, who I met at this media academy as well, who'd agreed to hang out with me for a couple days. So he picked me up, and he said, where do you want to go? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to go to Bulgaria. And he said, great. So we headed south and kind of on a whim decided that we were going to go to Bulgaria for the day.
Okay, so why have you always wanted to go to Bulgaria?
I think there's something fascinating about like the post-communist, post-Soviet history there. In these countries that, like, you look at a city like Prague. At one point it was communist, but you can go to that city now and it's very like kind of Western. But in some of these like more out there countries, they haven't necessarily seen a big like Western resurgence of McDonald's and Starbucks and all of that. And so a lot of that like kind of pace and style of architecture and like the food and the drink and the language, everything's kind of stayed similar. And that's always fascinated me. So I was like, hey, let's go. Like, what's the closest big city in Bulgaria that we can go to? So we drove down to a city called Turnovo. And the city is essentially a horseshoe in the river. And on the inside of a horseshoe, there was this giant statue of 4 horsemen and a giant sword just like pointing in the air right next to this massive ornate national library. And on the outside of the horseshoe, it was basically like stadium seating for houses. It was kind of like built on a mountain. And so the houses just kept going up and up and up and up and up the mountain, almost like you're looking at the bleachers at a sports arena or something. So
Wow.
it was a really, really cool city just to sit down at that like crazy communist style statue and look out at the like hillsides of old houses. And there were like very few cars on the street, and we met a couple people there, and they were like, what are you doing here? And we're like, we don't know. What is there to do here? And they're like, well, there's the statue and there's the library. And we said, oh, cool. So I hopped on Atlas Obscura real quick, and I was like, oh, there's a really cool like communist conference center a couple hours outside of the city. Should we go? And we're like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. So we drive 2 hours into the mountains, and we show up at Stara Zagora. I probably butchered that, but Stara Zagora. And it's like this foggy day. We're like driving through the mountains, and all of a sudden we get there and we're like, is this it? What are we looking at? And the fog clears, and right in front of us is this like spaceship looking UFO conference center on the top of this mountain. And it looks like, you know, like the Enterprise from Star Trek, how it has that, the front of the ship is just that like curved circular dome looking thing.
Yeah, the saucer.
It was like a saucer on a hilltop in the middle of Bulgaria. And we were like, this is awesome. We should go check this out. So we cruised up and we walked around, and there was this metal, like, first off, it was ridiculously cool. There was graffiti everywhere, but it was like this really foggy day, and we were taking these really cool pictures, and I was like, man, I wonder if we can get in there. And then we found a metal grate on the ground that opened, and I was like, well, you only live once. So we took the rock off, moved the grate in, and saw that you could enter the building from underground. So
Oh my gosh.
we hopped in.
Oh no.
And
You were in a movie.
We started like climbing down, and all of a sudden we hear this shouting from above, and we look up, and it's like a military, like it's some sort of military man who's yelling at us in a language that neither of us understand. Oh man, and we got caught by the Bulgarian police while trying to enter a Bulgarian national monument. So that was fun. He made us put the grate back and put the rocks back on it. And he like kind of wagged his finger at us, and and we left.
And then you're like, I'm a silly American. I
Exactly.
don't know.
I was like, oh, sorry.
Is this
I
not
have
a part
no
of your
idea. He was not having any of it. And then on our way out, we saw there was this like tiny little guard shack, and we were like, oh, rats. Almost got away with it. So then we were like, oh man, we don't know where to spend the night tonight, because we had nothing booked. We weren't going to be able to make it back to Bucharest. So we drove 2 hours to get to cell service, and then there was like this like little coastal town. So I booked an Airbnb, and I was like, hey, can we check in an hour? It was like 8 p.m. And she's like, yep, my grandma will be there to let you in. So we like cruise up to this random town and stay the night. And we wake up the next morning, and I'm like, Olin, I've never been to Moldova. Do we think we can make it happen? And so just for some geography, Bucharest is south of Romania and Moldova is north of Romania. So essentially, we would have to drive all the way across the country to Moldova and then drive all the way back to the middle of the country because I had a flight the next morning, really early. So obviously, we did it. So we went, we went up to Romania, and we stopped for breakfast in a city called Varna. So in the morning, we were staying in a little seaside town called Varna, and we decided to cross over the border into Romania to a place called Constanta in order to eat breakfast, and it was like a really cool seaside town. So right on the water is this massive, like, it's like a communist casino. So imagine like a casino in Vegas from 40 years ago that's been decaying for 40 years, except then set it on the seaside in Romania. And so it was this big, imposing building, and we couldn't get in, unfortunately. But it was a place where when Americans would go and visit, or anyone outside of the USSR, they would pick them up at the airport. They would drive them in a really nice town car right up to this casino where every game was obviously rigged. And so everyone would lose all of their money, and like people would commit suicide on insanely high rates from this casino. And now it just like stands there right on the water as this like gray, imposing, once glorious building. So it was like really cool to learn the history and see it.
Wow.
And we ate breakfast at a place where the menus were like, looked like old newspapers. And I took the best photo I've ever taken in my entire life there of Olin reading the menu. So it was a very good day in a very good city. And we spent like an hour there, and then we're like, all right, we got to go to Moldova. So we booked it across the entire Romanian countryside. And when we got to the Moldova border, they did a full inspection of our car. They opened up every bag. They like looked under the car. They like asked us all of these questions, and we're allowed in the country. But it was like pretty wild. I got grilled for 10 minutes on why I was going there, to which my answer was, I don't know. What is there to see? What should I do? And they're like, I was like, I'm just a tourist. I don't know what I'm doing. I wanted to go to Moldova. So they let us in, and we were in this city called Cahul. And the sun was like just starting to go down, so we got some dinner and we walked around, and it was a very cool old town. All of the cars were really old. It was almost how I imagine like Cuba feels in a way, where like everything's kind of got that age to it, but not in like an unclassy way. It's like the cars were old, but they weren't unkempt. And just like there were families walking around with strollers. There were like eternal flames of communism in statues around, which I thought was fascinating. And there was like this little street fair that had knockoff Disney characters, which was frightening. But it was just a really nice thing to walk around. And the very last thing we said, all right, we're about to go back to to where Olin lived in Bucharest. Is there anything else we wanted to do? And Olin was like, well, there's an insane asylum that we should probably check out. Like an old insane asylum. It's been shut down forever. We should probably go check it out. And I was like, well, obviously now that the sun goes down, it's perfect. We have to go check it out.
Oh.
So we drive up and we park and we start walking. And it's like this big old hospital. And I hear music. And I'm like, what? Why is there music at this like old shut down like asylum? And so we like keep walking, and it's like it sounds like Soviet anthems, and I'm like, this is gonna be interesting. Let's keep going.
Oh gosh.
We walk up, and it's a dance party. It is it's like
What?
ages 40 and up doing traditional dances to Moldovan, Romanian, and Soviet music. And we're standing there just baffled. I'm like, I did not expect to see this here. So Olin's like, this is hilarious. Yeah, we should watch for a while. I was like, yeah, we could watch for a while. But there's no way I'm going to come all this way and not try to dance with some people. So we found the youngest people we could find, because that's the highest percentage that they spoke English, which they kind of did. And they were standing on the sideline too. And I was like, why don't you go and dance? And they're like, oh, we're not good enough. We're too shy. And I was like, perfect. I'll be an American for you. Get in here. And so I dragged them in, and we ended up spending an hour and a half learning traditional dances from the USSR, from Moldova, from Romania, and under the like full moon and twinkle lights in the middle of Constanta, in the middle of Cahul, Moldova. And it was probably one of the biggest highlights I've ever had of any trip that I've ever done, in the middle of a tiny little town that I never thought I would ever go to, with a friend that I'd happened to meet at a media academy 6 months before. And
Oh my God.
that was our kind of winging it trip through Bulgaria and Moldova.
Oh my goodness.
So then
Wow, Alex.
yeah.
Wow.
So then we drove through the night listening to techno radio to keep us awake. We got to Bucharest at 3:30 in the morning, got 2 hours of sleep, then I drove to the airport and flew home.
And then you took a vacation from your vacation after that point?
I think I had to work like the next day. It was pretty brutal,
Oh,
but
gosh.
I slept on the plane the entire way home. All of the planes, and then in all of the airports. It was great.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think I love the idea of having like a really nice planned vacation, but
Do you really like that idea, though?
I think it sounds nice, like, because I spend a lot of time on my phone, like, where should we go? What should we do? And then when there's multiple people, there's all that pressure where people are like, Alex, you travel a lot. What should we do? And I'm like, I don't know what you want to do. Do you want to go dance with some random, like, Russians? I don't, you know. So it's a lot less stressful when it's like, oh, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and everybody's on board. Then you're like, perfect. Everyone's going to be here and having a good time. So the thought of that sounds kind of nice, but I think this style of traveling just brings me life, where you just kind of roll up, see what's going on, walk for miles and miles and miles, and then sometimes stumble across things that are pretty magical. So that was it.
Love it. Well, thank you for sharing about your trip. We have a question for you about this trip based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You. If you could take us with you to just one thing from this trip, what would it be and why?
The first one's my fake answer. I'll give you an actual answer after this, but I would take you dancing just to see Ryan dance. Because getting Ryan out there with like 65-year-old Moldovan women sounds amazing.
So
Yeah, actually, that's my real answer, because I want to go dancing,
well, yeah,
first of
Cheryl
all.
would definitely want to go dancing.
And I want to see Ryan dance as
Yeah.
well.
Well, okay, but this may surprise you, but in that particular circumstance, I might totally be willing to do that.
Oh, 100%
And that's
you
why
would.
we want to see it. Yeah,
Because, like,
you totally would.
If it like that's a cultural experience, that's a unique experience you wouldn't get to necessarily have. And as long as they're like teaching me, and oftentimes those traditional dances are some sort of pattern, right? That's the only kind of dancing I'm any good at. Like if I have to like decide what to do next, all hope is lost. But if I'm following a pattern, I'm there.
I'm trying to decide if Ryan would look more like C-3PO or Kermit the Frog in that moment.
I think we need to
Probably
go and
Kermit
find
the
out. Oh. No,
All right, so I mean, I like that answer, but what is the real answer?
that actually also is my real answer, but I'll start it. I'll start it with a different reason. So I think it has to go without saying that I would 100% want to take you guys dancing. just because it was something that was so random and out of the blue, and it's not something that you could ever plan on a vacation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I would never go, in my vacation itinerary and say, okay, we're gonna stumble across this thing and do this thing. And so for that, and I mean, I would also love to see Ryan dance with a bunch of like 60, 70-year-old Moldovan women. I just think that would be such a precious moment that neither of us would forget for the rest of our lives.
A precious moment, like one of those little statues. So you think they'd make a little statue?
Just
out
a
of it?
little statue, precious moment, Ryan dancing. And so I think that would definitely be it. That would be so much fun to do with you all.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. Oh, the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here wanting to be ignored. Oh, let's go to India and I